My body's not an ornament. I wasn't created to be just sit on a shelf and to be looked at and admired. My body was created to be an instrument to help me do what my mission here. And so if that's the case, how do I take care of it? How do I want to eat? How do I want to look at myself when I look in the mirror, instead of saying, I hate that, flab here or whatever it is? Instead, turn that around and say, thank you.
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today, we have my dear friend, Miriam Shurpin, who actually lives in Pomona, New York, who is a registered dietitian nutritionist. And she's going to be talking to us about her work, what got her into this work, and its spiritual and Chassidic connection. Thank you so much for joining us, Miriam.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, tell us, what is a registered dietitian nutritionist? What do you do?
What do I do? In a nutshell, I help people improve their health, their relationship with food, and their body image. And for everyone, that kind of looks different because everyone has a different story. But there are those basic kind of guidelines that travel across for everyone.
Like what kind of things would you have dealt with?
So people generally come in with, there's all different conditions, type 2 diabetes, the whole kind of insulin resistance, glucose concerns, high cholesterol, eating disorders, IBS, and of course, there's always that weight loss that brings most people in. To the
Right, of course. So what got you into this field? Was there anything in particular that attracted you?
So it's not one of those stories that, from the age of 5, I knew this is what I wanted to be. No, it wasn't at all. I think the first time that it ever occurred to me was I was in a seminary in Israel at the age of 17. And somehow a friend of mine had gotten hold of this book on food and their nutrients. And for some reason, we were both reading it and we were fascinated. Someone even snapped a picture somehow. And we looked at each other and said, we should become dietitians. And then I forgot about it. Yeah. Right. And then I just forgot. And then 2 years later, I was working, I was teaching, and I just had, at times when I was a student, where I had teachers who were really passionate and it felt like this was their mission. And then there were those that it didn't. And I felt like I was doing this and I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. And I just didn't want to be one of those. Right. So I just knew I needed to do something different. And at the time, the National Health Service in the UK were running short on specific healthcare workers. And they were offering a full scholarship plus plus they would pay monthly for anyone who would sign up and be willing to do these different jobs. So I looked at the list, and what stood out to me was registered dietitian. I thought, hey, let me give it a go, and even if nothing comes of it, hopefully it will help me with my relationship with food. I didn't know what a kind of prophetic thought that was at the time, and so I jumped in. Wow. And it took years, and that's kind of what started the whole
journey.
Wow.
Yeah. Interesting. And was your own, I mean, you said it took a prophetic turn. Why is that? Was your own relationship with food something that attracted you to this profession, or that it helped you with this profession helped you with your own personal journey? Tell us a little about that.
Yeah. So from a very young age, I was always conscious about my weight. I had a very negative body image, and a very unhealthy.
Don't most girls?
Yeah, like most girls. So it was it didn't feel it felt normal because normal is what everyone else is feeling. So it felt very normal. And I had a very unhealthy relationship with food. I thank God I grew up in a very health conscious home, and I'm very grateful for that. But the downside of that was that I felt very deprived. I had, dinners from, freshly grown from the garden, which is incredible. But at the same time, I was the girl coming with, the whole wheat sandwiches every day. And I really just wanted a piece of white bread. And I had a friend who, I think I was like the age of 8, 9, who she would come in every day with this, just a plain white roll. And oh my goodness, I was desperate for that because like it just had glitter all over it. It was so exciting because it wasn't something I was exposed to. And I would literally beg her for her lunch every day.
Oh, wow.
Until one day her sister said to me, "You've got to stop, like, eating my sister's lunch." You know? Um, and then there was just, whenever I could get my hands on, like, a bag of chips, I couldn't just have one because I don't know when I was gonna have this again.
Mm,
So, it was like 6 bags of chips. And
right.
there was all this talk of like, you're not fat, but you will be if you do eat that
Ah,
bad food. There was all
ah,
this like good food, bad food. And if you eat the good food, you will be thin. And if you're
ah,
thin, you will be successful and you will be wonderful and beautiful and loved and admired, etc. And if you eat the bad food, you will be fat and you will be unworthy, etc. And that kind of whole background noise was what I was just, it was always there.
right.
And I didn't, think much of it, but it was something that I grew up with and wasn't comfortable. And I suppose when I thought that at the time, um, when I thought, hey, maybe this is something that would help me, that it kind of came to the forefront of my mind that this isn't what I want, and I
Mm,
kind of want to figure this out somehow.
mhm. Wow, that's so interesting. I remember I had when I was younger cousins who from out of town who their mother was very into health food, and I remember every time we would come over, they would come to our house. They would always raid the pantry for the snacks and the most unhealthy foods that they could possibly get their hands on. So
Yeah.
is this something that parents should be aware of, like not to overdo the healthy?
Yes, yes. I see this clinically a lot, and definitely with the research as well, because it's coming with the best intentions. It really
Mhm,
is. We want the best for our children, and these are parents who really care. And they really want the best, and they want, we want to provide our children with the most nutrient dense food. The problem is though is that we don't live in a world that only has nutrient dense foods available. That there's all
mm,
these other foods. And there's, for somebody who's Jewish, there's the foods, that the bad foods kind of are the foods that are not kosher if you're Jewish, right?
mhm,
That's the foods that we try to avoid. Okay, all the other foods, they're neutral. And
mhm,
we need to kind of go away from this model of good foods and bad foods, because yes, we do want to have more nutrient dense foods, but when we just focus on just those and we don't allow the other foods for special occasions or whenever, then deprivation is what
mm,
kind of kicks in. And then we have that unhealthy relationship with food where we kind of avoid it and then we end up binging on it. For some people, they end up purging, using laxative, etc., depending on how
mhm,
severe this goes. And so it's really important to understand that, health is a balance. And it's not just about getting in the perfect, you know,
mhm,
nutrients. We need to throw in those other foods as well and kind of think of it as an 80-20 rule in a sense.
mm.
80% of the time I have my fruits and vegetables and whole grains, etc., and varied and balanced throughout my day. And then there's that 20% where there's a nice sprinkle of those fun foods. And for everyone, that's going to look different. It might be,
Mhm,
once a day for somebody, it might be once a week for somebody else, whatever. And
mhm.
that's okay. There doesn't need to be any shame in that. And you could be perfectly healthy
Like on
with
Shabbat, to have it as a treat, right?
completely. Our next
Right,
shot is, yeah, yeah, yeah.
right. So what I found particularly interesting about you and your work as a nutritionist is the spiritual entity that you bring to it, the spiritual component that you bring to it, and the spiritual way that you look at the body and food, and particularly like our own body image. Can you share with us some of that?
Sure. So I think I'll go into like where that kind of came from.
Sure.
Um, so just thinking where to start. Um, so it's kind of back to my own story again, where I was, always felt that I needed to shrink my body. My body needed to be smaller so that I could, be more worthy, etc. All those, beliefs that came along with it. And so it was only once I actually went to school to study nutrition, that I went on my first like real diet.
Mhm.
And I lost a lot of weight.
This was at like what age? This must have been in your early 20s
Early
or
20s, early
yeah.
20s, yeah.
So you were never on the yo-yo dieting of teenage girls.
So I always tried but I never did anything specific. Like I never followed anyone else's thing.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to find the right, perfect, healthy one
Uh-huh.
for me.
Okay.
And so when I
Right.
found the healthy one, that was the one that
Right.
I did. But I would try to avoid, junk foods um, but I ended up, just feeling deprived and then binging on it because that's
Right.
what happened. So it didn't really work very well for me, which it doesn't for anyone. But I picked up on that pretty fast and realized I needed to do something more,
Mm-hmm.
specific. So yes, I went on that, first diet and I lost a lot of weight. And what I didn't realize at the time was that the weight that I had been was the weight that my body was supposed to be. It was very much, my set point weight.
Mm-hmm.
Genetically, that was, just like my height is a certain height and I have brown eyes, not blue eyes. That was the weight genetically I'm supposed to be.
You
And by
mean
me,
you mean we all have set weight points that we're of what we're supposed to be?
yeah. Let me explain that to you here. Here's my rubber bands. Okay. I like this to give this analogy to make it clearer. We all have a set point weight. It's a a small range that once we've stopped growing, naturally our body will do everything it can to stay within that range. And we have like an internal thermostat in a sense that will, even if you eat more one day, less another day, it will always try to come back to that point in
Mhm.
time, in your weight. Um, and unlike height or eye color, which we cannot manipulate, it is what it is. We can actually manipulate that weight
Mhm.
that we're genetically supposed to be by either not listening to our bodies and going on some form of diet and restricting our food intake, or exercising those, or there's other things too, but doing those. And then what can happen is I'm going to compare this rubber band to our weight. Okay, let's say this is somebody's genetic set point weight. They can manipulate it and they can make their body smaller than what it's supposed to be. Okay, so looking at this rubber band now, it's smaller, right? The
Mhm.
minute I let go, what happens?
Goes back.
It goes back. Okay.
Mhm.
So when somebody's going on a diet, anything, keto, Atkins, intermittent fasting, whatever it is, okay, they're going to lose that weight initially. Okay. But while they're doing that, our bodies don't know the difference between an actual famine going on
Mhm.
out there, or us being on a diet. And we're just not listening to our hunger signals, our fullness signals, our appetite. So it's going, oh my goodness. All right. You're losing weight, but I've got to make sure that if this continues, I've got to slow down metabolism and make sure that there's some fat storage. So
Mhm.
while this is going on, you're losing all that weight. Over time, your metabolic rate has slowed down and you're going to regain that weight.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, if you do that just once, okay, fine. It will go back. Okay. But if you keep doing that, what's going to happen to this rubber band?
It gets, like, all stretched out.
Exactly. It's going to get stretched out. And that's what happens to people when they yo-yo diet again and again and again. They
Right.
don't just go back within
Mhm.
two, because usually within 2 to 5 years, somebody will go back to
Mhm.
their set point weight. But if they keep doing it, they won't go back to their set point. They'll actually have rebound weight. They'll go
Mhm.
above where they're genetically supposed to be, and that will become their kind of new set point.
Mhm.
Okay. So back to what I was saying, that the time I didn't know this, and so my body was way below my set point weight, and every time I ate a little bit more or whatever, it would jump. It would like fluctuate like crazy, and it took so much effort to keep bringing it back down,
Mhm.
and so much headspace and fear of foods and etc. And of course, over time, because within 2 to 5 years, 95% of people who go on a diet are going to regain that weight. So within a 4 year period, I got on that scale and one day, and my weight was back up to where it was. And I was devastated
Mhm.
because in that time that I had lost that weight, the compliments were rolling in, the
Mhm.
admiration, and I didn't have a very good self esteem. And so that was, it's like giving a poor man $1. You give a poor man $1, it's worth a lot. You give a millionaire $1, thank you, but
Sure.
and I was like that poor man, and it was so much, and I was so devastated. And I went for a walk with a good friend that day, and I confided in her, and I was telling her about how I felt terrible about this, and I'd actually been practicing for it was my first year as a dietitian,
Mhm.
been practicing, and I felt like an absolute failure because here I am helping people lose weight and I can't even keep this weight off myself. Like,
Right.
where is this
Wow.
going? And during this walk, she turned around, she looked at me and she said, Miriam, What if the weight you are now is going to be the weight you will be for the rest of your life?
Hmm.
And that question hurt me, hurt me so much. I wanted to punch her. But instead, I took it home with me and I sat with that question for 2.5 days. And when I say I sat with it, I sat with all the beliefs that came up as a result of asking myself that. And it was so painful that it came out physically in my body. I actually broke out I had an infection. My fever was sky high.
Oh, wow.
And it was over those 2.5 years, she was a big part of, she spoke with me a lot over the phone. My husband was also between the two of them, giving me that space and that time to think it through. I walked away realizing that this is the body I've been given. This is my body. And if God did not give me the body of a size 0 model or the lifestyle for one, then obviously that's not what he wants for me while I'm here
Hmm.
in this world. And if that is the case, then what are my choices? I could give up. I could say I'm done. I could neglect this body. I can become depressed. I could keep fighting it like I have been, but I've been down that road and it just isn't so fun. Or I could say, thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you, Hashem. Thank you, God, for the body that you've given me and the ability to be here in this world and do what I need to do and accept who I am and appreciate that my body is not an ornament. And I'm quoting this because it's actually part of a title of a book. My body is not an ornament. I wasn't created to just sit on a shelf and to be looked at and admired. My body was created to be an instrument to help me do what my mission here. And so if that's the case, how do I take care of it? How do I want to eat? How do I want to look at myself when I look in the mirror instead of saying, I hate that, flab here or whatever it is? Instead, turn that around and say, thank you. Thank you for this incredible stomach that digests my food, for this, abdominal region that helps me, it allows me to give, give birth to children, and these legs that help me walk and do what I need to do. And that was kind of the foundation. It made me realize that I need to switch this for myself, and I'm going to switch this in my practice as well.
Hmm.
And that's where it all took a turn. And it made me realize that you know, I want to help people to learn to accept, to appreciate, and then how to nurture the body that they have so that they can be healthy and well with the body that they have right here and now.
Hmm. So you're really looking at the body as an instrument that God gave us, that's what God gave us, and that's how we need to use it, in a positive way, rather than just something that we can use for our self-image.
Completely.
How do you feel diet culture takes away from our image? I think you once said that diet culture is like the idol worship of our times. How is that so?
Yeah, so I do feel that way in a sense that I feel that we're the generation we're told that is at please God, bringing in Mashiach, and that means that we're the ones who are going to reveal Hashem in everything. And I believe it was Eov who said, from my flesh, I see you, God. And we have a choice to look us at ourselves and say, I hate this. I hate what you've given me. And serve the bodies that we've been given. Or to realize that, wow, this is this incredible tool that God has given us to be here and to make this a dira b'tachtonim, a dwelling place for him here in this one he's given. And the fact that I have a body is the proof that I am alive. He wants me here, and I have this ability to be here at the finish line.
Hmm. Wow. So you're mentioning a lot of Hasidic teachings in there. How has and I know you learn a lot of Hasidic ideas, Hasidic taught knowledge. How has Hasidic teachings helped you in your practice and in your view of yourself as a holy body, if you want to call it so?
In every way. In every way. It's incredible how I could learn something within the scientific world, and then you open up a Tanya, and there it is, this constant struggle
Mm.
of, oh, I wish that, constantly what I hear from other people, that, I if only my body was smaller, etc., or that choice that we constantly have it within our thoughts of, am I going to choose that thought? Am I going to, go with that belief, or am I going to let go of it and realize that I'm actually a divine being, that God put me here? I mean,
Mm.
that's, the Bainani struggle. There's this struggle to constantly work on the thoughts, our speech, our emotions, our deeds. That it's totally all there.
All connected. So how do we do that? Like, how do we look at ourselves as a divine being rather than just an ornamental body? How can we switch our thoughts?
It's, first of all, hard work. I think probably the hardest work out there. I think there was even a Hayom Yom a couple of days ago. Um, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was Vov Cheves.
The Hayom Yom is what we learn like daily. It's daily quotes from the Rebbe that apply to the time. And what did it say?
And I believe it said, I have it right over here, um, that working, let me put it open because otherwise the right words are more powerful. Um, okay, so there was a Hayom Yom, but then there's the edition that I have has this little explanation underneath. I don't know if you could see that here. Okay, and it says, so this is from the explanation part of the underneath that hit me. It said, avoida literally means work, and changing one's inner self is indeed the hardest work possible. It goes on to
Mm.
say more. But yeah, this, changing those thoughts, it's so hard. And there's different ways to go about it. But I think, one way is, first of all, understanding that thoughts are not us, and then they're
Mm.
optional.
Mm.
And many of these thoughts that we have and beliefs that come in, they're trying to help us. They are trying to help us. So, somebody, let's say, I'll give you an example of someone who, um, they want to eat something, piece of bread, a sandwich. Okay. But there's this thought in their mind popping up and saying, no, don't have it. If you have it, you're going to gain weight, and then you'll feel unworthy, and nobody will admire you or respect you, etc., and all the beliefs that come along with it. And there's a choice right then and there to say, am I going to go along with that thought and that belief? And if I go there, where is it going to take me? Or am I going to actually say, thank you? Thank you for coming and trying to help me. I know that you mean the best for me, but if I go down that road, I may end up losing my period. I may end up my hair falling out. I may end up, with a heart attack, for God forbid. I don't want to go there. And instead, I want to focus on what I really value. I want to show up in life. And I don't need other people's admiration to get me there. So instead, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm hungry right now. And I know that that's going to be a filling lunch if I have that bread. Let's let me get
Mm.
into a sandwich. And so instead, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to eat that and say, thank God, thank you. Thank you, Hashem, for this food that I now have the energy to go ahead and do whatever I need to do.
Hmm. So does that mean that we shouldn't ever restrict our food, or we shouldn't ever be careful with what we eat?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, 'cause there is a fine line, okay? And many times people kind of get carried away and they think that means, "Oh, I can eat whatever I want,
Right.
whenever I want," and
My
no, that
dietitian said, right?
and I've had people, it's that's common to happen, Um, so no, that there you know, that's why, we have these signals inside of us. We have
Right.
signals for hunger, we have signals for fullness, we have signals for emotions, and for our appetite. And it's about learning to be in tune with those, being able to hear them. And that's what I teach people, that how to become in tune with that. And so that you can understand that when you do see that piece of bread, I'm going to use bread as an example again. It doesn't mean that I see it, so I eat it right here and there. No, it's
Mhm.
about saying, wait a second, I'm not hungry for this right now. That looks really good. And I'd love to have it. But, how about I go about and do my work? And as soon as I'm hungry for it, I can totally make that into a sandwich. Right now, I'm not hungry for it. It's not going to bring me more joy, more energy. It can wait.
Mm-hmm.
So there definitely is that thought process there. It's not about eating, like I said, whenever and whatever.
Right, right. Wow. Um, how do you think we can go about changing society and the diet culture of society and this view that the body is just this ornament? How can we get people to look at ourselves more as souls and divine beings? Like, what would you like to see? How would you like to see it being done as a nutritionist?
I think that again, it's one person at a time. When people take that time to sit down and understand, why am I thinking this way? Where are these beliefs coming from? And are they truly serving me and my purpose here? Then they're able to make those changes. And when they make those changes, and even if they're not even throwing it at other people, just by being that example,
Mm-hmm.
that brings light. And
Mm-hmm.
that then ripples out. And other people see that and say, hey, I love that. I want to do the
Mm-hmm.
same. And I've seen that with clients coming in, with I had a client once who said she was at a restaurant with, some friends, and she ordered some food and ate a little bit, and she was full, and she packed the rest up to take it home. And somebody turned to her and said, I can never do that. I'm at a restaurant. It's my time to just let go. And because I'm on a diet again tomorrow, and got to eat it all. Where did tell me more? And there she was. She sat there and she explained to this whole table, and they were like, wow, oh my goodness, I want to learn to do that. I want to be able to improve my relationship with food, etc. So that's just an example of how, when we just do our thing,
Mm-hmm.
people will pick up on that and ask questions, and it will ripple out.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. If you ever got a chance to speak to that younger version of yourself, what would you want to tell her at this point, now that you know what you know?
I would love to go back and give her a huge hug and let her know that you're going to be okay. You are so going to be okay. Don't try to shrink your body. Know that your body was made for you, and you're good enough exactly as you are. Just be you. Just be you, and you will be okay. Hashem's with you every step of the way. Just show up as you.
Hmm. And how do you try to bring this into your children's life? I know you have, how many children do you have?
5, Karen.
5. So how do you help your children? And I assume some of them are girls, especially girls are seem to be so full of this diet culture that we're so involved with shrinking ourselves. How do you try to teach them and educate them in a way that they won't get sucked into this whole attitude of looking at the body as just this ornament rather than a divine being?
So my kids are younger. They haven't hit the, I think the preteen, when
Mm,
kids hit puberty, that's where I've had cases that are younger, but generally that's the time where the negative body image can kind of kick in. So I do have a younger age group, so it hasn't
mhm,
been so applicable,
mhm.
but I definitely just try to model that behavior, just to be that example.
Like, how would you model that?
So talking about my body in a positive way, um, seeing that I don't go on the scale. It's not something that
Mm,
defines me.
mhm,
Um, I don't talk about when they see me talking to friends or family, that I don't beat my body up,
mhm,
um, or try to, change my clothing so that I look thinner.
mhm.
So it's just in those ways, and then eating wise. Um,
I'm doing like X, 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 all the wrong things on as you're talking. Yeah.
and
Right.
then there's eating wise, just letting them see that, how to eat in a way that is comfortable and gives you energy and feels good, and is enough, and able to say, okay, I've had enough and I can move on now.
Mhm.
So not so much, preaching it, but just trying to be it.
Trying to be it, right. Do you think that a lot of us eat because of emotional reasons? Do we do emotional eating?
So emotional, so that a lot of people think that they eat for emotional eating, for emotional reasons. And there are many that fall within that category, but there are more that think that they fall within that category of emotional eating. but they actually don't. And there's the underlying reasons for that are generally because people are just not feeding themselves adequately enough throughout the day. They are hungry. And that could be as a result of being just too busy, lack of education, or diet culture that I have to restrict my eating. And then along with that is also deprivation. People
Mhm.
feeling that there's the good foods, there's the bad foods, and so I can only eat the good foods, not the bad foods. And so how do I manage that? And you know, um, and then when it comes to a stressful time, people are feeling, anxious, tired, whatever, and they're hungry and deprived, then they'll find themselves turning to food
Mhm.
and they think, "Oh, I'm an emotional eater," but really they haven't ruled out the fact that they barely eaten throughout the day. They're feeling deprived, and yes, they are feeling a strong emotion, but if they had eaten and they didn't look at food as good or bad, and they knew how to incorporate all foods in a way that felt right for their body, then they'd be able to actually cope better with whatever emotion is coming up in that moment, and they could actually put tools into place to help them rather
Mhm.
than having to turn to food in those times. It won't be as much of a pull for them
Mhm.
to go to food in
Mhm.
that moment.
Right. I mean, it's interesting because in Judaism, like food plays such a big role. How do you see that, like from a dietitian's point of perspective or point of view? Like food has such a central role in Judaism in terms of on Shabbat we eat special foods. For the holidays we eat symbolic foods. How does that play a role with the whole spiritual makeup of how we look at food and from a dietitian's perspective on how the role that food should be playing in our lives?
Um, I think it fits right into the idea of, like I touched upon it before, that health is a balance. It's a balance of basically about six things. Okay, if you think of a pie chart, and you divide it into six, there's our environmental health, our physical health, our spiritual health, our social health, and a couple others. I have it on a paper, but I'll leave it out for now.
Mhm,
And when we get too focused on just one of those areas, we lose the balance. Okay, so you can
mhm,
get people who are so set on living in an area where the air is so pure and clean that they'll move there and then they kind of, they're an extrovert and they need people to be around. And so they're
mhm,
missing that social aspect, and that will affect their health. It will actually affect their blood parameters. So it's really important to get that balance. So when food comes in, for times of celebration, for religious reasons, it totally plays a role. It's part of getting that balance of health, and it's about the two don't contradict each other. Just take Shabbat, right? It's kind of designed that there are three meals that we eat. There's the day meal, then there's the shalashudas, and not everyone keeps two, but that's meal then, and then there's like malava malka at night. There's already three meals set up, and that's
and then Friday night before that, or even a 4th really, right?
right, and then there's the Friday
Yeah,
night meal. But
yeah,
again, that's totally in line with, if you're, what we want to do is get people need to be eating regularly on a regularly basis, roughly every 2 to 4 hours, getting food into their bodies. Okay,
mhm,
so if you're getting in food every 2 to 4 hours, that could fit very nice. If you wake up in the morning and you eat, Shabbat morning, you wake up, you eat breakfast, and then 3 hours later is your Shabbat lunch meal, no problem, and then another 2 to 3 hours later you're having another meal, fine. And then you're having another one 2 to 3 hours later. If that feels like a lot of food, then maybe you're eating too much at every eating time. And maybe you need to
mhm,
tune in to what are the foods that, really look appetizing to me? How can I balance them out in a way that feels good and walk away feeling comfortably full so that within 2 to 3 hours, I have an appetite for the next meal.
hmm,
So I don't feel like in any way it contradicts, and in fact, it enhances and it brings joy and connection, which is all so beneficial to our health and well-being.
mhm. Interesting. What do you think about, like, the latest fads with drugs for slimming down or surgery to slim down? What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, so there's two parts to it. That there's the drug, because it's been around, like the GLP-1 analogs. So they've been around for a while. They've been used as a diabetic drug, and there's that role, okay, within you know to help with bringing down glucose levels, etc. Okay, so that's one part. I'm not going to touch upon that for now. In terms of the weight, it's a big it's a big
Mhm.
topic, and again, as if somebody is going on this because their belief is that if my body is smaller, I will be more worthy, I will be admired, I will be liked, then we're going down the same rat hole.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they'll go on that drug and they'll lose that weight. And then they're hit with they'll get all the compliments in the world. And the short term, they're going to feel really good. Okay. But then they're going to get hit with a question as their weight plateaus. Do I stay on this drug for the rest of my life, or do I come off? Okay, now if I stay on it, there are side effects, and there's also long-term side effects, some that we're aware of, some that we still don't know. Okay, so do I want to risk that? There's also the money, which is
Mhm.
something to, and all the malnutrition that can occur as well if it's not dealt with the right education. Okay, and then if I come off the drug, if I choose to do that, the weight loss only happens. It usually only stays off that amount whilst you're on the drug. So you going off it, you're most likely going to gain that weight back.
Mhm.
And just
Mm.
like any other diet, back to the rubber band,
Mhm.
okay, it didn't know the difference between you being on Ozempic or a famine going on. So the minute you come off it, whoa, my goodness, every bit of food you give your body is going to be stored as fat, because what if another famine happens? We've got to make sure there's backup. Okay.
Mhm.
So it puts people back into that same choice
Mhm.
that we touched upon earlier
Mhm.
of I can delay accepting and appreciating my body by going on this. I
Mhm.
can delay it by a year or 2 or 3 or 4, but it's gonna hit me at some point.
Mhm. Right.
And at that point, it may even be harder because I may
Hmm.
have some consequences as a result of being on the drug, and, I may even be at a higher weight.
Mhm.
I've come off it.
Right. Right. Wow. What are your thoughts and goals for your future?
In this area,
Or in general?
in
Yes.
general, um Oh, that's a loaded question. Look, I ideally, I would love I'd love to see the tide change. I'm seeing
Mhm.
it. I am seeing it. I know there's so many people doing the same work as me and working hard and seeing this and working towards it. And I'm seeing it too, thank God. And I would love to continue seeing that. And I, especially for the next generations, the eating disorders, disordered eating, these things are sky high. And specifically, unfortunately, in the Jewish community.
Mhm.
And I'd love to see that change. So I'd love to have a part in that,
Mhm. Absolutely.
continue to have a part in that.
Right. Wow. Can you leave us with one thought from Hasidic teachings that you can share with us that perhaps we can visualize or imagine when we're going off in the wrong direction and looking at ourselves in the wrong way and not seeing our soul?
Um, what comes to mind is that this is a struggle, and sometimes it can feel like we're drowning in it. And I'm just, is it even worth fighting these thoughts and beliefs? But when we take look at this moment that I'm in right now, and I'm going to quote you because I learned this from you, and you can tell me where you got it from if it was from you. And we think this concealment was created for me.
Mhm.
This moment in time and this thought that's coming into my mind right here and now was put here for me to redeem.
Mhm.
And so I can go along with it. I can be a slave to it. I can believe it. Or I can actually say, you know what? No, I'm going to stand up to you. And I'm going to let my divine soul shine just in this moment.
Hmm.
And I'm going to say, I'm enough. And I'm going to thank God for what He's given me instead of blaming myself or slamming the body that He's chosen for me.
Hmm. Wow. That's a real shift. Wow. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your words of wisdom and for your practical help and tips. And I hope that your dream is realized, that the tide does change, because so many people are suffering because of this lack of looking at the body in the right way and looking at yourself in the right way and seeing yourself as this divine being who is worthy.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on here.
So, what did you think of that interview from Miriam Shurpin, a nutritionist? I found it interesting that she focuses so much on the spiritual aspect of us being a divine being and how that could really change our shift in so many areas, but also in the area of eating and eating disorders, where there's so many people who are having these disorders because, like she says, we're looking at ourselves and as our body as some kind of ornament to provide us with self-worth rather than seeing it as a divine being that God has given us as a way to use for our divine soul, that the body is just this vehicle for the divine soul. And if we could shift perspectives in that area, it really would help our the way that we eat food, the way that we look at ourselves, the way that we look at our body, and of course, in so many areas of our life, in the conflicts that we have. I liked what she quoted about the world being a world of concealment and how Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, the world is created for me, the concealment is created for me, and it's my job to really reveal that and to overcome it. And we can do that one step at a time. And of course, if someone is having an eating disorder, this is a way of looking at food in a totally different way and looking at our body in a different way. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and what you thought about what Miriam shared with us today. If you enjoy watching these podcasts, I hope you are subscribed to Chabad.org/extraordinary. We are also on all podcast platforms. We love to hear from you, and we are so grateful that you are watching and part of our extraordinary community.